Good evening. Today, two Trump-era pressure campaigns collide with hard institutional limits. At home, the White House efforts to install loyalist U.S. attorneys, sometimes bypassing the Senate's traditional confirmation path, is facing growing judicial and political resistance, with high-profile resignations and Senate leaders refusing to scrap the blue slip tradition. The administration appears to be shifting tactics rather than doubling down. Abroad, the White House is escalating against Venezuela in a way that goes beyond sanctions rhetoric. U.S. forces have seized an oil tanker carrying Venezuelan crude, a move Caracas calls piracy, and one that signals a sharper edge to Washington's regime pressure strategy. I'm Mona Mosalhi, and this is In Focus. Politicus reporting frames a notable pivot after months of unconventional maneuvering to keep preferred U.S. attorneys in place. The administration appears to be recalibrating, leaning more heavily towards attacking the Senate blue slip custom rather than risking repeated courtroom defeats or a potentially precedent-setting Supreme Court loss. The recent resignations and court rulings matter because U.S. attorneys are not just prosecutors, they are the federal government's enforcement spear in key districts. Legal challenges to appointments have already disrupted continuity and intensified scrutiny over whether the Justice Department is being used as a political instrument, and the Senate reality is blunt. Two Republicans in the chamber have shown little interest in eliminating blue slips, while also publicly blaming the administration for slow paperwork and nominations. We're joined now from Washington by Mr. Peter Roth, contributing editor at Qnews. Mr. Peter, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thank you. Now, let me start by asking, is the White House actually waving the white flag here or simply changing the battlefield from courts to Senate procedures?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than all of that. Trump wants his people in. He wants them in as quickly as possible. And he'd like to, if he can, engage in shortcuts. Sometimes other presidents have been allowed to do similar things. And what the president is discovering is that he has made enemies in the judicial branch who are asserting themselves in a way that I've not seen in 30 more years of covering American politics to block Trump administration initiatives, big and small, including now weighing in on the qualifications concerning the appointments of acting U.S. attorneys. It's really about partisanship coming from judges more than it is things coming out of the White House, in my view.
What's the deeper institutional issue? Is this about speeding confirmations or about expanding presidential expanding presidential control over prosecution?
Well, it's about speeding up confirmations because look, the Senate has the capacity
Mhm.
for folks that don't know the American system. The Constitution that provides that for a number of offices within the executive branch and in the federal judiciary, that the president can nominate a person to hold that office,
Mhm.
but that the Senate must give its advice and consent to that nomination. For a long time now, when the Senate has been controlled by the party that is not in power in the White House, the Senate has found ways to slow walk the nominations, leaving positions unfilled. This has particularly been a problem for Mr. Trump during the period in which he's been president, because many of the nominations, even if they're not being their approval is not being required by a supermajority of senators to break a filibuster, that the Democrats are requiring the Senate to adhere to all the rules of confirmation, all the hours of debate, all the hours for voting. And so that stretches nominations out over months, leaving positions unfilled. The theory being that if a position's unfilled, it's not going to have a Trump designee in it doing damage to things that Democrats hold are important. And so Trump has tried to get around that through a series of interim appointments in key jobs, like some of the U.S. attorneys. Now, I anticipate that this is all going to be resolved very quickly, because before the Senate went on Christmas recess, or on Thanksgiving recess, they took steps to change the confirmation process according to Senate rules so that they can confirm bunches of nominees at one time. I think right before or right after going out for recess, they approved 97 nominations that had been lagging. There are another 75 or 76 that are supposed to be approved this week. And if it can move faster, then you're going to see a lot less of this business of interim appointments. And so Trump won't need to short circuit, because he can get his people through in regular order.
But then when you're speaking about taking advantage of jobs that are not filled, or filling the jobs that are not really that who do not have apparently those who fill them, while at the same time choosing loyals, isn't that a kind of expanding presidential control over prosecution?
I don't think so. The president is empowered to do certain things. Every president is empowered to do certain things. And the nomination of the U.S. attorney in the various districts is one of them. The president won the election, and elections matter. Personnel is policy. And if he wants to pick people who are going to prioritize the investigations of President Trump in his first administration and in the 4 years he was out of office, because people in the government abused their authority to either conduct those investigations or to move to prosecutions. I think that's not only well within his rights, I think that's an important check on the power of government. There are a lot of situations where one party or the other talks about doing something that would benefit them, using powers that they really don't want the other party to have, to use in kind if the situation reverses. This is an example of that situation. The resources of the federal government were put to use to investigate Donald Trump. I think it is fair to say that his rights as a citizen were violated, and that people who had been appointed to senior positions in the Obama administration and career employees who remained in the first Trump administration abused their authority to go after the president and to derail his presidency. I think he has every right. I think whoever the president
is it about the right or law? I mean, here isn't there in the Constitution the power of the executive body, the judicial body, and the legislative body, and in this way, those powers are mixed in the hands of the presidency?
Well, some of them are, but there are checks and balances throughout the system. The due process, the grand jury process, the general transparency, just to name three, and that's just in the legal process. Look, I think you can make an argument that will stand up that people inside the Biden administration sat around and said, let's find crimes that Trump committed so that we can prosecute him, convict him, and keep him from running for president in 2020. I have a problem with that. That's not what the judicial system is supposed to be about. Mm-hmm. I think that's a criminal act. It's an abuse of power. It ought to be discouraged. And if President Trump in this administration wants to investigate that and go after those people, if the case can be made that that's in fact what they did, I think he should do it. And I think he should do it not because I'm a Trump supporter and I want to punish the people who went after him. It's because I believe in liberty. And I think that people who are in positions of power in government need to be held to a higher standard. And if they abuse those powers, they need to be called to account. And that's broken down somewhere along the line. That's broken down in the American system.
But what if we change situations here? Who would hold, if President Trump puts loyal people, who would put any or judge any of his misactions at that time? I mean, who would put him accountable at then?
Well, president is accountable to the American people. The president is, to some degree, accountable to the criminal justice system, although that's still being worked out because of a recent Supreme Court decision that actually preserves the president's ability to operate in official acts and keeps him from being indictable in criminal justice situations. So you have the Congress, you have the House and the Senate, and I think the founders intended that supervision of the executive be done by the legislature,
so
not by the judicial branch.
What if the Senate leaders refuse to end blue slips? What realistic options remain? More acting appointments, more litigation, or a return to traditional confirmations?
Well, blue slips are part of the traditional confirmation process. That's what some people don't understand. Senators, by tradition, not by law, but by tradition, were supposed to have considerable input to appointments that were made in their states. It was a deference to senatorial power. It was a courtesy. That's what the blue slip system is about. As nominations for judicial posts and for U.S. attorneys have become increasingly politicized, the blue slip has become politicized.
The firing of prosecutors is not politicized? The Haber ruling function, doesn't it function as a kind of warning shot to the wider administration?
As what we in America refer to as lawfare, the use of the legal system to redress political grievances has grown. the U.S. attorneys have become more and more politicized. They're supposed to be nonpartisan. Their concern is supposed to be justice, not nailing scalps to the wall, not the number of convictions they can amass during their tenure, not the members of the opposite party for whom they can cause trouble.
So
So
you were speaking here about appointment of judicial names who are loyal to the president, and you're speaking about not politicizing issues or their authorities or their powers, but then at the end of the day, who's the loyalty of those judiciary system or appointees or prosecutors? Whose I mean, what loyalty will they have to who? To the
their
executive
loyalty
authority presented by the
their,
president, or to the state?
their loyalty isn't to who. Their loyalty is to the Constitution, to which
Exactly.
they swear to uphold and defend.
Exactly.
That's the primary concern.
Yes,
Is
indeed.
and we expect that, judges who are appointed, federal judges are appointed life tenure. They can serve until they die or resign or leave to take another job, perhaps by being promoted to a higher court.
So
We expect that their primary loyalty is to the Constitution. But even there in America, there's a debate. There are people, and I side with them, who say the Constitution says what it means, and it means what it says.
exactly.
There are other people who think the Constitution is open to broad interpretation, and that there are things that we are supposed to sense emanate from it without it actually saying it.
And this is the job of the Senate, right? Now, politically, does this fight strengthen Trump with his base as a war on the system, or does it risk looking like an administrative failure to govern?
I think that Trump's political opponents will make it seem like Trump is abusing power. That certainly seems to be the thrust of the argument. I don't regard this as an abuse of power. If he is appointing U.S. attorneys who are investigating the people who investigated him to see if they are guilty of the same crimes or similar crimes that they charged him with, I think that's an appropriate response. I think that's an example of checks and balances at work.
Exactly. So what does this issue tell us about the durability of America's checks and balances under the maximum political stress?
Well, they seem to be holding up just fine. Thank you very much. And I appreciate when they're being tested. I don't like the positions or the periods in which the checks and balances aren't being tested and everybody's getting along and everything's going along swimmingly, because that usually means something, in my mind, something's wrong. Usually taxes are growing up, government is growing, or we're headed into a stupid war. I think the founders intended there to be great tension. They didn't intend for there to be political parties, but they intended for there to be great tension between the different branches of government. And that tension would help govern how they behaved. The purpose was to prevent the government from becoming so powerful that it infringed upon our liberty as citizens. Remember, in the American system, the people are sovereign. The Constitution begins, we, the people, did these things for this reason. We set up this government to do these things and no more, and to protect these liberties. It's very clear. I'm on the side where the people who say, well, the Constitution means what it says and it says what it means. And there's and we don't get into these.
But then,
these
if the Constitution
conversations.
says what it means, then you people, as you're saying yourself, sir, are the one who have already elected the Senates.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the one who has the say on the prosecutors. So again,
Well, see,
what will that do to the checks and balance system?
The thing about, again, the blue slip that you refer to is a procedure that is observed out of tradition, not out of law. It is a deferral to a home state senator's own political concerns that arose out of the accommodations that senators made among each other. If the White House were to, for example, appoint a senator's principal political foe to an important judicial position, that senator could blue slip him. Senators would understand that. They would want the same consideration shown to them if the situation were reversed and it was something happening in their state. It's not law, it's tradition. But the blue slip means that the nomination dies. It doesn't mean that it goes forward and goes to the floor for a vote. It just means it dies. And partisanship is so rancorous right now that in any state that has even one of its two senators is a Democrat, then they routinely blue slip Trump's judicial appointments, Trump's nominees for prosecutor, without considering their qualifications or anything else. The mere fact that they have been chosen by this president is enough for them to generate a blue slip. I think that's excessive. And I think most people, if they understood that was what was going on, would also regard it as excessive. Trump won the election. He won it clearly. He won it unambiguously.
Yes,
he carried all 7 of the swing states.
Yes,
you can argue that there is a mandate here and that these efforts to simply block the Trump appointees because Trump is making the appointments ignores that mandate, and it isn't what the American people want.
That's, of course, from your point of view here, but Mr. Peter, please stay with us because the key question now is whether the administration shift becomes a reset back to confirmations or a new phase of procedural war inside Washington. Remains to see, of course, from legal resistance inside Washington to coercive pressure beyond its borders. The question now is how far executive power can stretch before it meets hard limits abroad. Now, the Foreign Policy reports a sharp escalation. U.S. forces seized an oil tanker near Venezuela carrying Venezuelan crude, the first former seizure of Venezuelan oil cargo since Trump's 2019 sanctions regime, according to reporting and court documentation. Reuters adds critical details. The tanker was seized on December 10, 2025, under a judge-signed warrant that was close to expiring, and the ship has loaded roughly 1.8 million barrels of Venezuelan Mare crude. The vessel is now heading towards the U.S. Gulf Coast region with plans to offload via ship-to-ship transfer. Caracas condemned the seizure, while the move signals Washington is willing to operationalize pressure, not just announce it, raising the stakes for maritime enforcement, sanctions compliance, and regional stability. So, Mr. Peter, you're still with us, right? And
yes,
from indoors to outdoors, what is the strategic message of seizing a tanker? Is it sanctions enforcement, deterrence, or a step towards broader coercion?
I think it's a step forward on sanctions enforcement. It's branded by the administration as an anti-terror move. I think the administration is taking advantage of the looseness. Yes.
Define what do you mean by anti-terror?
Well, this is what I'm getting to is that dating as far back as George W. Bush and the Patriot Act after the 9/11 attacks. We've, I think, mistakenly given the national security and law enforcement piece of the federal government a lot of authority to prosecute the war on terror, as George W. Bush called it. And I think that there are some definitional issues and some abilities that the federal government now enjoys that may need to be curtailed. But they have labeled Maduro a narco trafficker. They have labeled the Venezuelan government a supporter of narco terrorism. They are alleging that the oil that was in this tanker was being used to finance narco terrorism, and they were well within their rights to seize it. And they will use the proceeds from the sale of the oil on that tanker to fund additional efforts in the war on terror. This gives some of us here in the United States a little bit of pause. Are one of the fundamental parts of the American system is due process.
Now let me get or quote the Venezuelan side while describing this act as piracy, while the foreign policy frames this as a regime pressure escalation. How close does this move push the U.S. towards a de facto blockade posture, even without calling it one?
I don't think there's going to be an absolute blockade. I think, though, that there's going to be a selective targeting of ships that are carrying either high-value cargo or cargo that can be branded narco-terrorist product to help strengthen the narrative coming out of the Trump administration that this effort to increase pressure on Maduro, which I think touches not just on the issue of narco-terrorism, but also touches on the issue of illegal immigration into the United States, which has mostly ground to a halt under Trump, and also the efforts of Russia, China, and Iran to destabilize the American system. It touches on all of that, and regime change, which we haven't exactly called for, but are hinting at very broadly, is the ultimate goal here, to get rid of Maduro and his senior people and to allow the Venezuelans to have a free and fair election. As we all, I think, have judged, the last election was not free, nor was it fair.
But the word hinted is not exactly the right word, because Trump has publicly floated military options before. So do tanker sieges serve as pressure without invasion, or do they increase the probability of confrontation? What do you think?
I don't think boots on the ground is how this happens. I think that the pressure just continues to build. Venezuela was a first world country. Under Chavez and his successor, Maduro, they've turned it into a place that would be lucky to be considered third world. They've wrecked the economy. People are starving. They can't get food. They can't get health care. They can't get their lights back on. They've wrecked the place, and they need to go. And the Venezuelan people voted them out in the last election. They refused to leave. They manufactured ballots, and they hung on to power.
That is speaking about sovereignty of a country anyway. But if Maduro responds asymmetrically, diplomatically, legally, or through energy channels, what pressure points does Venezuela still have?
I don't think that Venezuela has any pressure points. I think Venezuela's allies, the Chinese and the Russians, have pressure points, but I don't think that Venezuela does. I'm sure that there are some people inside the Trump administration who are just hoping that the Venezuelans commit an aggressive act against the U.S. personnel that are currently in the Gulf of Venezuela right now. Give us an excuse. Start something, please. We'd be happy to finish it. I'm not sure that's what the president thinks, but I think there are probably people around him who think that. That concerns me.
Now we're speaking from the logic of power. Power is the kind of action that prevails.
I don't think we got to be careful, because the president gets a lot of advice from a lot of people, and I'm just saying I think there are some people around there, and there's certainly some people in the country who feel that way. I think the president wants Maduro to leave, just pack up, We'll talk about who can
Right.
go with you, talk about how much of the money you stole you get to keep, and where you're going to go. Are you going to go to Cuba? Are you going to go to Abu Dhabi? Are you going to go to Sweden? Where are you going to live out your life? Living off the money you stole from the Venezuelan people so they can get back to the business of running
Now,
the country.
again, we're speaking about a sovereignty of a country and the right of people to choose. Anyway, my time
Well,
is out.
but Maduro violated their right to choose. They
But
chose
it
some
is still,
they
it's
stole
the
the
right
election,
of the Venezuelan people to choose. Mr. Peter
and they
Roth,
chose
we
somebody
thank you
else
so
that they
much.
refused to
Unfortunately, my time is out and I have to end it here, but we thank you so much for your insights. Two stories tonight, one about control of prosecution at home and one about coercive leverage abroad, both pointing to the same reality. This White House is testing limits and the institution's courts, Senate customs and international law are being forced to answer in real time. This has been In Focus. Good night.